kind of
wait. Let me ask you just a couple quick questions.
Yeah.
Were there dietary restrictions? So
No.
things you could and couldn't eat or drink. I'm going to ask you like a list of sort of behavioral things just in like 5 minutes.
Yep.
Were there things you couldn't eat or drink as a Scientologist?
No.
Okay, so alcohol's okay.
Alcohol's okay. Drugs are not.
Cigarettes are okay.
Cigarettes okay. Scientologists smoke like chimneys, especially in the 70s when I grew up. It was smoking and it was drinking. In fact, my dad actually had an alcohol problem, which I didn't learn about until later because they covered it up pretty well. But yeah, alcohol and cigarettes are okay.
Okay. Are there is there a dress code? Are there things you can and can't wear?
No, but if you were to be overly sleazy, let's say, walking into a Church of Scientology, especially now more so than in the 70s, somebody's going to talk to you about it. But there's no official dress code or guidelines or anything like that. They're not the quiverful Duggar, types as far as that goes.
And when you say sleazy, you mean like a woman with a low-cut dress or a
guy, with wearing goofy shorts, or Speedos or something. I mean, somebody's gonna have something to say about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about like control of sexual behavior, of like masturbation, of looking at pornography, of premarital sex? Were there guidelines around sexuality for children, youth, or adults?
In the 70s, no, not so much. In the 80s and beyond is when the clamps started coming down on that. And masturbation's a no-no. This is not written down anywhere. It's all sort of in the culture of Scientology at this point. And this came from Miscavige more so than Hubbard, that there is to be, masturbation's bad, it's called sexually restimulating yourself, And the idea is that you're pulling mental image pictures when you're fantasizing. You're pulling these pictures from your mind, and some of these pictures might be coming from your reactive mind. So you're kind of reactivating that, and you're reactivating past stresses and trauma as a result of doing that. And so it could be harmful to your mental health. So you shouldn't be fantasizing too much or too heavily. And so therefore, you shouldn't be, jerking it too often, because that's always, connected with fantasizing. And so that's why it's potentially bad for you. And this was based on one sentence that Hubbard wrote in a book back in 1951. And taken, they take that one line. I mean, Hubbard literally said, masturbation's not that big of a deal. Lots of species do it. And that's what's written. But then Miscavige took it and said, oh no, look, it's very harmful to you. It's very restimulative. You should not be doing it. And has used that to bludgeon Scientologists and control their sex lives and their masturbatory lives since the 1980s.
Okay. Is adultery frowned on?
Very much so.
What about just stealing and lying and the basic 10 commandments?
Yep. So there's nothing about obviously taking the Lord's name in vain or any of that. There's no sanctity in Scientology, but there are rules about being moral. There are lots of morality rules in Scientology, but most of them are pretty common sense. Don't steal, don't lie, stuff like that. Don't hurt a person of good intent.
But do all those come from some writings of L. Ron Hubbard versus the 10 Commandments, or?
Yeah, there's a book called The Way to Happiness.
Okay, you mentioned that.
Yeah, we talked about that, I think. And that was where he codified a moral code. And that didn't exist in Scientology until 1980. So up until then, there was what was called the Code of Honor. And that came out in 1952 or 53. And Hubbard said it was a self-disciplinary code. It couldn't be enforced on you, but most Scientology ethics officers will try to enforce it on Scientologists. And the Code of Honor has things like never disparage, an ally or something. And, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there, but now all of it, of course, is escaping me right now. But you can look it up online. The Code of Honor is on the Scientology website.
But that was in some way replaced by the way to happiness or whatever.
Yeah, it's sort of, the code of honor was a pretty steep hill to climb for most people. It's got some pretty tough restrictions on it, which is one of the reasons why Hubbard said it was so. It's only it can only be enforced on a self-disciplinary measure way. But Scientology will enforce on you no adultery, don't be promiscuous. They're not really into promiscuity, stuff like that. Take care of yourself, take care of your body, stuff like that.
Okay. You've kind of already addressed this, but I want to really hit it explicitly. So whether or not there's a God, whether or not Jesus lived, whether or not Jesus died for our sins, a Bible, how does Scientology approach all those things?
Hubbard calls it all nonsense. Basically,
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Hubbard regarded organized religion, and especially the Christians in the Catholic Church. He was really down on the Catholic Church all the time. He basically considered the organized religion was a control operation used to control populaces. And he thought that the priesthood, which he talked about in those terms, the priesthood, these kind of things, were people who were taking advantage of the masses for their own personal wealth and ego and that kind of thing. And he wasn't wrong. I mean, it's not like you can't find lots and lots of instances of this. But he just wrote the whole thing off. And he said that that they were sending their prayers up to a myth, that the Christian God was a bit of a myth. And that there was this very long religious tradition that was sort of spiritual in nature, and it was sort of a good thing. And he would talk appreciatively about Buddhism and about the long spiritual tradition of the Vedas and the Vedic hymns and the Indian Hindu traditions. But he was pretty down on Western religion, and he just thought that they were out to get people's money and out to get people's, and out to control people's lives. And again, he's not particularly wrong. I've developed my own ideas about organized religion since leaving Scientology that parallel some of those, but they're not based on Hubbard's nonsense. I've come to my own conclusions about stuff.
What about God? What about God?
Yeah, God is just something that Hubbard really doesn't address very often. What he said, there's one line that I've always remembered, which is that you will not actually be able to understand God or the infinite being that is the creator until you have gone through all of Scientology's levels to the point that you have a clear understanding of every other kind of life that exists in the universe. And I'm paraphrasing right now. There's another principle in Scientology called the dynamics. Sorry, I got to give you this exposition so this sentence will make sense. But Scientology divides all of life into 8 parts. Those parts are represented as concentric circles with you in the middle. You for yourself as an entity, which is called the first dynamic, is you. The second dynamic is sex as an act, and your family, your immediate family, right? They're all second dynamic. The family you create and the family you come from, that's all second dynamic. The third dynamic is groups. Any group you're part of is part of your third dynamic. You could call your work your third dynamic. You could call a club you go to your third dynamic. It's just part of groups that you're part of. So you see these concentric circles start moving out in volume and size and influence, right? So the fourth dynamic is mankind as a whole. All people, men and women, right? Everybody. That's the fourth dynamic. Fifth dynamic is animal life, plant life, any other kind of life except people. All over the universe. This is not just on Earth, right? All life, fifth dynamic. Sixth dynamic is the material universe, matter, energy, space, and time. The seventh dynamic is spirits, all spiritual entities, any spiritual existence, anything having to do with that is seventh dynamic. And finally, the eighth dynamic is God or infinity. So Hubbard said that you will not be able to understand the eighth dynamic until you have advanced through and understand all of these first 7 dynamics. So that's the actual thing that he said and the context of it. So, when you say something like that to a bunch of Scientologists, what they interpret that to mean is that they have to advance to the same level that Hubbard is at the top of the hierarchy of services and counseling that you do in Scientology. You have to get all the way to the top of that, and then you'll have some concept of what God's all about.